about rounds up our business arrangements. Now we start our session on railway. For this session, in the next 3 hours, we will be joined by my ESCAP colleague, Mr. Sandeep Jain, who will give a brief backgrounder on ESCAP's work on railway transport, zeroing in on digitalization, quite a relevant development at this time. Then Mr. Goran Andreev will guide us through the rest of the session, focusing on the highlights and issues on railway transport as elaborated in the learning material. Sandeep, the floor is yours.
Can you hear me and see me?
Yes, Sandeep, we could hear you, and the slides are already on the.
Okay. Slides are already on the screen. So thank you very much and very good morning to all the distinguished colleagues from the government of Mongolia. From the list of participants, I was very enthused by seeing the representation from the wide range of ministries of government of Mongolia, including Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Ministry of Finance, Ministry of Road and Transport Development, Mongolian Customs. So this is really very important meeting I can see. And for landlocked developing countries like Mongolia, the importance of railway transport can hardly be overemphasized. So what we are going to do for you in next couple of hours is to take you through the latest developments which have been taking place on the railway transport. As you all are aware, this pandemic has once again proved beyond doubt the resilience of railway transport. So what we have seen during the pandemic is that while other modes of transport, for example, air transport or road transport, they suffered, they had adverse impact, but railway transport actually year on year, if you see, the traffic on Euro-Asian railway corridors has actually increased. In terms of supplying pandemic material or other kind of parcels which have increasingly gained importance, they have gone through railway transport. So this really provides a railway an opportunity. So this is a crisis, right? This is a crisis of humongous proportions, both economically and socially. It has been devastating. But as they say that in every crisis, there is an opportunity. So this, particularly for railways, you can use this opportunity to turn around this crisis and enhance the comparative advantages of rail transport to make it more competitive. So with this background, let me quickly go through my presentation. So can you please, next slide, please. So I have actually 3 things for you today. As most of you, particularly from Railway and Ministry of Foreign Affairs, will know, please keep on clicking because I think I have this animation. It might come. Yes. So there are 3 things for you. First, briefly on intergovernmental agreement on transition railway network. And then we have smart railway solutions. Basically, I will give you the rationale of them. And then finally, on smart railway solutions. So each of these modules will be discussed at quite a length by my colleague in next couple of hours. So, but I want to create a structure in your mind so that you can take as much information as you can take. So please move on. So coming on your screen is a map of the transition railway network. This is, you are familiar with this network. The red lines indicates the gauges, the Russian gauge, 1520 mm. The green one is a standard gauge. The The brown one in South Asia is a extra broad gauge, 1676 mm. And then in Southeast Asia, we have a meter gauge. So as you can see this network, please, next slide. This network was formalized by ESCAP member countries through an intergovernmental agreement on Transition Railway Network. It has entered into force in 2009. And I'm pleased to announce that Myanmar has become 21 contracting party of this agreement only yesterday. So we have 21 contracting parties now. This, as you know, this agreement was, the basic aim of this agreement was to develop a coordinated plan to develop a regional rail network which can serve the needs of intra-regional trade and transport. Now, what is most important about this agreement, and I encourage, Mongolia has been a very active participant to this working group. So there is a working group which meets every 2 years, and this is a regional platform to discuss the persistent and emerging issues in international railway transport. Now, this working group, we believe, will set the agenda for rail transport in the region. And we already had 6 meetings of this working group. The last one took place in December, around this time, 10th and 11th December. And what has been observed that countries are now increasingly becoming focused on operational issues. Apart from infrastructure issues, they have now been emphasizing that the operational issues are very important if we want to realize the full potential of this network. So, for example, the issues related to electronic information exchange or data interchange among railways to railways and railways to border agencies, particularly customs, has got increased attention from the railways of the region, as some of you who had followed the deliberations during the last working group must have seen. So please, next slide, please. So I would encourage all of you to take active participation in this workshop, in this working group. The next working group dates have been finalized. You can note down particularly the concerned officials, 20 and 21 of May. The calls for amending any part of the agreement have already been, are now being circulated actually. So as I said in the beginning, that the pandemic provides an opportunity for railways to become more competitive, enhancing their comparative advantage. So let us see, before I go into what will help you to increase your advantage, let us briefly go into some of the important trends that have been observed in international railway transport. So one of the biggest trends which has come up is the increasing freight trains moving from Asia, particularly China, into Europe. Now this big trend has been really so big that it has led to emergence of many other trends. So what are these small trends? So there are various routes which have come up for international transport from various cities in China to various cities in Europe. Major route we have observed passes through Kazakhstan, but Mongolia and directly from China to Russia also are important routes in this. So this has been further supported by increasing investment in rail infrastructure that has been happening along these countries. Particularly Kazakhstan has been investing heavily in its rail infrastructure. In addition, many new rail services have taken shape. For example, as I mentioned earlier, the parcel trains have now started rolling along this corridor. The Universal Postal Union and Organization for Cooperation Between Railways, OSJD, together are laying down the basic ground rules as to how whole train comprising of parcels can be can be moved along this corridor. And this is particularly important when cross-border and international e-commerce is rising very rapidly, and this has been seen during the pandemic also. In addition, there is also a move to transport perishable goods through reefer containers. Some progress has been made on this direction. And also, another thing which has come up is on movement of or the transport of sanctioned goods and Russia through Russian territory by use of electronic seals. In addition, we also see that new alliances are being built. For example, there is a cooperation with the private sector companies. So, for example, the DP World has entered into collaboration with Kazakhstan Railways to build a huge special economic zone along the borders of Kazakhstan. And also, we also see a lot of cooperation among railway companies. The Indian Railways Container Corporation entered into an alliance with the Russian Railways container company to develop international north-south corridor. So what is important in this is to note that these trends were already there, but the pandemic has provided us an opportunity to look them in a fresh perspective. We also look at what are the current priorities of ESCAP member countries in terms of development of railways. So as you can see, the railway network development is on the top of many member countries of railways. Developing international railway transport is another priority, particularly for landlocked developing countries. We also see the efforts on shift to rail. Certain countries have fixed targets. For example, Thailand wants to put their current modal ratio for rail is 1.5%. They want to put 5% on rail in next 5 years. Similarly, sustainability in railways, issues like more electrification of tracks, how energy efficiency can be further promoted in railways are also something which many railways are pursuing. Railways inherently are more environment friendly, but they do have a carbon footprint, and efforts are being made by some railways to take these emissions to zero level. And lastly, digitalization has something which has been already important component of railways, but I think with pandemic there, it has got a heightened traction. So next slide, please. So this was the basic trends which we see were there. And so why do you now need smart railway solutions? So as I said that this crisis provides an opportunity. Please go on. Provides an opportunity to railways. But keep in mind that the short-term boost which railway demand has been given may not persist. For example, currently air cargo is badly impacted because aircrafts are not flying that much. So that cargo has shifted partly to rail. But eventually when things go back to normal, if rail cannot be that competitive and cannot be that reliable, there will be a tendency to go back. So it will be very good that if railway can further reduce the friction at the border crossings, make the entire process more transparent, and also seamlessly merge into the logistics chains. So they have to be more agile in tapping the business opportunities. Next, please. So it is in this background we have come out with smart railway solutions. So please keep in mind that this study has been done under United Nations Development Account Project, trade and transport connectivity in the age of pandemics, developing contactless, seamless, and collaborative solutions. So that is the basis: seamless, contactless, and collaborative solution to sustain transport connectivity in the time of pandemics. So there are various modules. I will not go into details of them. You can see them on your slide. We have smart railway operations. We have smart railway maintenance, smart railway financing. Next, please. Then we have smart railway border crossings, which actually has a lot of further sub modules. Please go ahead. Yes, and then also smart railway customer orientation. So this is, please keep in mind that this is a work in process. Goran will be actually lead for smart railway border crossings. Of course, he will go into the all aspects of this training, but eventually, as we further build this program, and our intention at ESCAP is to develop a big capacity building program on smart railway solutions containing different modules so the whole idea of these smart railway solutions is to deepen and expand the range of options available for your railways. Not all of them will be equally important to Mongolia Railways, but some of them will be more important, and then we can discuss which modules or which parts, sub-modules are more important for Mongolia, and then we can go into more details of that particular aspect. Next slide, please. So I also want to take this opportunity and to briefly go through what ESCAP is working in a larger picture in developing railway transport in the region. So we have 8 areas of work which are coming on. 4 of them are coming on your screen. Let me quickly go through them. We are working to develop a comprehensive online database for Trans-Asian Railway Network. This will provide you a tool along with Asian Highway Network and our network of dry ports, a comprehensive picture of the regional transport assets. And so this will help you to make sound investment decisions. You can clearly see how the freight is flowing and which areas are weak and which areas we need to strengthen in terms of providing infrastructure, and there will be better utilization of all modes of transport. Another area which we are working is on supporting electronic information exchange among railways and between railways and control agencies. Here, I understand Mongolia has taken step, and I just want to take a minute to tell you that last working group, it was clearly said that there could be a move to add an annex to the Intergovernmental Agreement on Trans-Asian Railway Network to reflect the current realities. And I think Mongolia can also support this initiative because eventually it will help ESCAP to render technical assistance and provide support in this area of work. Another area which we are working on is to develop guidelines for harmonized custom formalities for transit. So this work is in progress, and we are Goran will give you some indication of this. We are working with OSJD and probably with OTIF also will come on board. The fourth part of work is on developing corridor management mechanisms. So here we are working with the countries in Central Asia, particularly Kazakhstan, Turkmenistan, and Iran, and developing on a corridor structure because they have developed a new railway route between north to south. And there is a need for coordination among the railway and other stakeholders to attract more freight along that corridor. So please, next, please. So I'm seeing some challenges on the side of sound being low. I hope my colleagues are taking care of that. Uh, so let me. So number 5, you can see developing of smart railway solutions. So there we are. So we are now talking of that. Next, we are also exploring the potential of developing a strategy or a framework for deepening the digitalization of railways in ESCAP region. I think during the middle of this session, I will give you a brief overview of that sometime after Goran has run through its first session. And finally, we are also working on enhancing the sustainability of railway transport, particularly focusing, as I said, in decarbonizing the railways further. So all this is being done to encourage modal shift to rail so that we have a system of transport which is very balanced and integrated intermodal transport, and which help our member countries to uh, to to ensure that this sustainable transport becomes a very critical ingredient of uh, sustainable development agenda. So this is what I wanted to say. Yeah, next slide, please. So I have covered the most important parts which I wanted to say, but on the screen you can see some of the analytical and knowledge products on international railway transport. This PPT will be available. So if you click on these links, you can go into these studies. The latest one is a policy brief which we have developed on COVID-19 and its impact on railway sector in Asia and Pacific, which is all available online. So, yeah, please, next slide, please. So I want to thank you all this morning for joining this session. Um, I want to thank our sub-regional office. They have been a great, this is a great cooperation between our sub-regional offices, and we are ready to support Mongolia in strengthening further its railway transport in all its aspect. If you have any particular issues where you can feel ESCAP can add a value, please do not hesitate to come back to us. I thank you all once again for all your kind cooperation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sandeep. And so we're about to I'm about to give the floor to Goran, unless there are burning questions for Sandeep during his presentation. I am looking now at the message chat box. I don't see anything being raised. So on that note, may I now give the floor to to Goran and Dev. Goran have years of experience actually in transport, facilitation, and customs.
Hmm?
Goran has done research and study in the field of railway transport, in particular railway border crossing procedures. So, in his vast years of work experience, Goran has been involved in practical implementation, harmonization of legislation with relevant international instruments relevant to transport facilitation and custom systems. Goran, we would before I give the floor to you, we would like to express our appreciation for participating in our session and for really being on board to share your knowledge in this subject matter. And the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Fee, for this kind introduction. Good morning, distinguished participants. It's a really pleasure to speak with you today, and I hope we can have some discussion also on all these topics that we are going to touch. Sandeep actually made an excellent introduction, showing us all these activities that ESCAP is already undergoing, and we will be more focused on the connectivity issues on the corridor between China, Mongolia, and Russian Federation, which is actually the main aim of this workshop. So next slide, please. Today, we will go to a range of topics. So it's kind of ambitious program, but hopefully we can go through all of it. So first we will start with emerging trends, which Sandeep already mentioned some of them. After that, we will tackle on interoperability, because this is one of the key elements of the efficient railway international corridors. And after that, we will go one by one of some of these smart solutions that Sandeep mentioned, starting with enhancing electronic information exchange. We'll have some case studies that you already have in the material provided. So that will be first part in this session. And after the break, we will go with some new technologies for border crossing inspections and controls. We will discuss a little bit on customs transit procedures in international railway transport, and the options to streamline and enhance border crossing with joint border controls. At the very end, we will just briefly mention some of the key issues on corridor management mechanism, because I think that you have already had some special sessions covering corridor management. Next slide, please. So every international transport corridor or economic corridor has its own specifics, and as well as each section in that corridor has specifics. For example, in Mongolia, you have own railway transport specific, economic specifics. However, we are here interested in some general similar drivers which are shaping railway development. So therefore, in addition to those national specifics, it's important to understand this global emerging trend. Sandeep mentioned some of them. So we will stress 4 of them. First is sustainable economy. The second is international connectivity. We will talk about railway as a part of overall logistics, and highlight a little bit the issues on reliability and resilience of railways. Next slide, please. So recently, we had some meetings, and for example, in 5 years after Paris agenda, and UN Secretary General actually made some kind of warning that humanity is waging a war on nature, and urged all nations to declare the climate emergency. It's clear that we have to increase our efforts to build sustainable economy, and transport has important part in that endeavors. So if we see some global statistics, it seems that railways has some 8% of the passenger transport, and a little bit higher percentage, about 28% on the surface freight transport. So probably if you have statistics in Mongolia, these are the different number. But what is interesting here is to see what is the share of emissions. For example, entire transport sector is estimated to have about 14% of emissions. Out of this 14%, a lot of it, a substantial part of it, is related to road transport. Contribution of railway transport is only 3% in emissions of CO2. So it is clear that railways is green and sustainable mode of transport. What is most important is to have some kind of estimation what will happen in future. So international transport ITF projected some kind of figures about what will happen by 2050. So we have figures that demand for transport will triple. So we have 3 times more demand for transport, which is not distributed equally by different modes of transport. Also, there are some kind of specifics. For example, there is potential to increase transit, which is higher than the average percentage of growth. So this situation clearly shows that we have to deal with this increased growth demand, which means increased negative externalities, with some sustainable solutions. And one of it is to increase the use of more sustainable transport modes, which is railways transport. Next slide, please. So railways is clearly more energy efficient mode of transport in comparison with road. So it's about 6 times a low energy consumption, simply because of these physical characteristics of lower friction. And it's much clearer option, as we discussed previously. So let's see some negative externalities which we were talking about. So railways has 85 times lower external costs which are related to traffic accidents. Depends on the methodology and the differences. So we have from 6 to 9 times lower costs which are related to CO2 emissions. So if we combine all of these negative externalities, it is shown that railways, it's about 12 times lower cost with regard to negative externalities than road. Because we have first mile and last mile usually organized by road, even if we have this combined transport with substantial component of railways, we will have about 6 times lower external costs of railway transport than the road. So it's clear that this is some kind of advantage. However, this is not translated in the price often, because the cost of these external negative effects are actually borne by the societies. So what we need here is to strengthen these national and international policies which favor railway transport. And we have a lot of these shift to rail initiatives, which can be a wide range of policies, from taxation to support of research, to support of development, to support of implementation of these shift to rail initiatives. Also, we have a lot of activities which are going in development of new green technologies. It's not only electrification, but also some kind of new technologies of hydrogen and battery trains. So we already see that there are lots of going on in the road sector. So the railways have to keep up the pace with these new technologies as well. In the part of financing also, we have some solutions which are offering some green bonds, green loans for increased possibilities for investment in green railway solutions. So next slide, please. Another trend, emerging trend, is increased importance of railways as a part of international connectivity. So we are evaluating connectivity based on how well each node, each point is well connected with other points, other nodes in the network, not only by railway transport, but with all modes of transport. So for railway, it's important to have these two components, the hard physical infrastructural connectivity, but also very much high on the agenda is soft operational connectivity, which means access to railway services, interoperability, facilitation of cross-border railway operations. This is from the railway sector. Another is the sector of regulatory controls, so the role of customs, border agencies, inspections, which are on the customs. So idea is to have as much as possible seamless movement between the different areas which are enabling this connectivity. And the railways are working hard on that part, not on the infrastructure, but also soft measures, which also Sandeep mentioned. So we will have several specifics after that in this session. One thing that I would like to highlight here, it's the effect of investing and going in enhancing only one component actually has some kind of more limited option for increasing connectivity. So the connectivity will be much more increased and the effect will be more visible if you invest in both, in hard connectivity, but also in soft and operational connectivity. Some figures are actually provided for the region and for Mongolia from one of the ITF studies. Next slide, please. So we have a lot of international international agreements, also some multilateral agreements, bilateral agreements, which are supporting this international connectivity, and they are creating some kind of favorable environment that we can actually realize these connectivity projects. Sandeep mentioned this intergovernmental agreement on the Trans-ASEAN Railway Network with active working group, which is working not only on the coordination in infrastructure project, but also in some kind of operational issues. We have, for example, Belt and Road Initiative. We have a Eurasian Economic Union are coordinating their international policies. Here we are because of the one of the activity of the program of China-Mongolia-Russia Economic Corridor. You have a lot of bilateral arrangements between Mongolia, China, Mongolia-Russian Federation. For the customs and other control agencies, it's important to have some kind of instruments on international level, such as International Convention on Harmonization on Frontier Controls. World Customs Organization is also providing some instruments which are supporting this connectivity. So this list could go several slides actually. So I think that it's very clear that we have enough arrangements. So one of the main issues that maybe countries need to put more efforts is on coordination, and hopefully we can support from the ESCAP side, and to be more on the practical side to see how these instruments could be implemented in practice. Next slide, please. So another aspect that we like to talk is about railways as a part of overall logistic process. So traditionally, railways has some kind of captive assured markets, which led the railways maybe to be more focused on infrastructure rather than on understanding some kind of changing of the markets, changing of the customer requirements, changing of the needs. So it's very important to support all these efforts of the railways to keep their commercial orientation, because in that way they can avoid this vicious circle of underinvestment, so they can be relevant, they can be commercially relevant in that fact. So it's clear that railways are doing a lot, and they're always trying to increase their operational efficiency to reduce the costs. But what is very important in this effort is to have an overall view of the supply chain. So not to be relatively limited on the railways part, but to see what are the other parts of the supply chain and how to be better integrated. So the solution is with building of strategic partnerships with all actors in these logistic processes. So these strategic partnerships should provide addressing the fragmentation of the networks, railway, road, other networks. Maybe some integrated planning in investment that make this seamless flow against all logistic network. A reduction of these inefficiencies with interaction within the logistic chain. And eventually that will make some kind of reduction of the costs for the consumers, which is actually one of the key elements why the consumers will choose one mode of transport over another. Again, here there are other issues that are very important, such as we have different options of making the railway transport more attractive to the consumers. So at the end, what we like to encourage is increased cooperation between the stakeholders, with railways, with shippers, with freight forwarders, with third-party logistic providers. So there are different types of options they can choose. So maybe some affiliated companies, mutual beneficial agreements, everything in order to provide attractive door-to-door solutions to their clients. And that will actually provide a lot of opportunities for the railways themselves. Next slide, please. Another emerging trend that I would like to highlight is reliability of railway operations. So this is one of the key elements of competitiveness of railways. So we can divide it as physical and non-physical reliability, and a lot of smart solutions are possible here in order to increase the reliability. For example, transfer of from traditional to predictive maintenance, which is based on monitoring of conditions of the rolling stock and infrastructure, and use of advanced analytics to organize better this predictive maintenance. Automation in general, automation in train driving, automation in shunting operations, use of digital tools for different data-driven operations. So now we have more and more available different types of sensors, e-seals, drones, different types of technology, which are supporting exchange of information and increasing the reliability, because the organization could be done in more efficient way. For non-physical reliability, we have a calculation of estimated time of arrival, which is now could be done with some with improved accuracy, because some railways are experimenting with use of artificial intelligence in that part. Electronic data exchange, we already mentioned several times, and construction of some kind of digital platforms where not only railways but other relevant parties could exchange different data, which are important for organization of railway operations. Next slide, please. Closely related to this is the resilience of railways, which was also mentioned, and it was tested during the COVID pandemic. So despite all these challenges that we have, because we have economies shutting down, the borders closing, railways managed to do relatively well, because they reacted fast with these brief interruptions on the railway network. And actually, they try to use this opportunity because of undershipment and much more demand for the railway services. What is here important is some kind of a long-lasting impact that we will have from this crisis, which shows that we will need more predictability in the future. The companies will be interested of the railway reliability. So we can assume that dependence on the human factor, on the physical interaction, the moving paper around, physical controls will be have to be reduced as much as possible. Harmonization of border crossing issues is very important as well. And all this automation and information exchange and digitalization was actually accelerated by the crisis. So maybe it's not no new solution, but now it's much more accelerated. So railways have to follow this trend. Next slide, please. So these are the emerging trends that we were talking about. I would like to ask from the floor if you have any comments, if you have any suggestions, any questions that you would like to share. Let me try to check the chat box.
Yes, on that note, just to reiterate also, as mentioned by Gumbold and resonated by Goran, please ask your questions. May I request, we have several participants from the Transport Ministry, so this is a particularly of interest to them. May I check if there are any queries for now? You could do so by putting it on our message chat box, or you could request to speak, so you may raise it on the floor.
Yes, while waiting, just to clarify, as you mentioned earlier, we'll have a couple of times these brief stops to use as opportunity for you to interact, but feel free to interact in any point, not only during these stops, maybe at the end, maybe even after the session. We will be happy to continue this conversation. Thank you.
While you if our participants would want to also say it in Mongolian, we have our translator that could facilitate the translations for English so that Goran may be able to address it.
If not, we can continue briefly.
Yes, please, Goran.
Yeah. So next slide, please. Okay. So now we are going to the next part, which is interoperability. As I mentioned, efficiency of the international railway transport couldn't be imagined without high level of interoperability. So if we have highest possible interoperability between different sections in the corridor, we can have well-connected corridors, enabled seamless movement. So idea is to have from different national railway networks to have one well-connected corridor. So that's why we need some comprehensive approach on interoperability, which will tackle several issues. So they can be grouped as technical interoperability, legal interoperability, operational interoperability. Sometimes we are referring also to electronic interoperability as a part of this operational interoperability. So all that comprehensive way is actually focused on developing some kind of common parameters of interoperabilities, which will be valid for each part of the sections, and what is happening on the border crossing at some most critical points where we will see if there is some kind of lack of interoperability. So not only infrastructural, but also non-physical barriers will be tackled with this interoperability part. Next slide, please. So technical interoperability is first part, which refers to technical characteristics on railway infrastructure and on rolling stocks. So we have different type of common parameters of infrastructure and rolling stocks, starting from the track gauge, structure gauge, about the tunnels and loading gauge, about the load of the railway transport units, maximal axle load and connected train length, rolling stock specification, which actually provide opportunity for vehicles to move across the different sections of the corridor. So theoretically, if you have these common parameters of all these rolling stock can move along the corridor, but that is not possible, as we know, because we have some lack of interoperability, which is not so easy to address. Simple issue is not simple, but one of the issues, very obvious issues, is break of gauge that happens, for example, in Mongolia, on the border between Mongolia and China, when you have different break of gauge, 15-20 millimeter and 40-35. So here we are talking not how to introduce interoperability, but how to efficiently deal with this lack of gauge, which is break of gauge operations, such as transshipment of containers, which are preferred option because provide efficient movement of the containers from one wagons to another. Some cases this is not possible. They have a change of bogies. So how to efficiently organize these bogie stations in order to move the bogies of the wagons. And in some very specific circumstances, I don't think that's much applicable in Mongolia. We have the variable gauge bogies, for example, for passenger trains and for some very specific, maybe chemicals on the relatively shorter destinations. So here we have an idea of mitigation of potential inefficiencies that we would like to talk about. So how to reduce the amount of return wagons, of additional reloading, which are unexpected, which shouldn't be happening at the border crossing. So one option is how to actually put some kind of a jointly applicable standard, which each of the parties are aware, and they exchange information from the beginning of the starting of some kind of railway transport operations. So the railways are actually able to organize themselves in a better way in order to deal with this technical lack of interoperability. Next slide, please. So one of the issues that we've just highlighted was need for increased efficiency of break-of gauge operations. Here you have several issues that are needed in order to be able to organize efficiently. So you need sufficient rail tracks with the boat gauges. You need sufficient capacities at facilities, side tracks. Sometimes you need container yards, platforms. Of course, you need available equipment such as gantry cranes and ridge stackers and sufficient bogie changing stations. One of the new developments is increasing automation. So we have automation of loading and unloading, and also automation of shunting procedures, which is speeding up all these processes, make the processes much more efficient. For railways, it's still very difficult to have full automation because we still have a lot of manual technical checks that we have to do. But there is a clear trend of increasing of the automation for loading, unloading, and for shunting operations. We need efficient coordination between railways on the corridor. That coordination can optimize the processes, organization of the processes, and coordination within the country and within the different players, such as railways, wagon owners, providers of services. What is also important is to try to maximize the time, maximize the efficiency of the time used at the border crossing. So organization of this border break-of gauge operations in parallel with the customs and other regulatory processes. So that will cut the time necessary for stops at the borders. Next slide, please. We have many examples of organization of transshipment of containers, a lot of investments in the region, in China, in other countries. I know that you had also some investments as well. It would be good to talk a little bit about that. So idea is how to maximize the transshipment of the containers. So we already mentioned all these necessary preconditions, but when you're trying to organize, one of the potential streamlined procedures is to try to organize direct and simultaneous transshipment of the trains moving in the opposite direction. So that is not always possible, but to increase the number of such trains which are directly and simultaneously transshipped. And after that, to try to increase the optimization on the work on the use of container yards. I already mentioned a little bit about automation of loading and loading. So in the manual that that we provided, there are some videos, there are some links. I don't think that we need to put this video on. Apologies that maybe we had some kind of technical problems in the manual, because at the moment I'm not sure that all hyperlinks are working, but I think that we will update that one so you can use these materials afterwards to get some kind of additional links. Next slide, please. So here it's good opportunity maybe to think what is going on at the moment and to have some kind of feedback maybe in Mongolia, because I understand that you had some experiences with break-o gauge operation at Mongolian and Chinese border. I haven't visited, even though I was in Mongolia in 2016, but we visited in that time the border crossing with Russia. We visited Sukhbahtar. So they don't have this type of operation, but I know that there are some new logistical capacities. Can we hear here maybe what are the benefits that you already have? What are the remaining challenges that you're experiencing at this border crossing? Thank you. Can we see if there is some kind of...
Yes. In fact, I'm looking now at our participants list, and I note that we have our participants and friends from the border crossing. Uh, Anyone would wish to take the floor to share their insights about the points raised by Mr. Goran? Or maybe our friends from the Investment Research Center? At this point, any questions or insights?
Yes, from latest what I was reading, but that was only some presentation that I've seen that this logistic park is probably already open, but I don't have that information as
We
well.
have one
Yes,
requesting to
great.
speak from the Ministry of Road and Transport.
Great.
Our meeting support team is facilitating for, yeah, okay. I think we're having a request from our one participant from the Ministry of Road and Transport. Our IT support team is just facilitating it.
Mongolia MRTD, understanding that you request to speak, your request to speak is accepted. Could you please check if you have allowed Kudo to access to your mic and camera? Please do not cancel the request. Now your request to speak is accepted. Please check at the padlock icon next to the internet address live.kudowe.com. Now you accidentally release the mic again. Please just click turn the mic and camera on in the middle lower part of your screen.
Yeah. Hi. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Okay. Okay. Yes.
Surya didn't get, so are we going to have some intervention or we can continue?
Fee, could you please advise, please? Thank you.
Hold on. Are we having we have our participant from Mongolia to raise the question? Has the question been raised? I'm listening at the English channel, but there's nothing, no translation going through, coming through.
Yeah. Actually, I don't see any questions. So in the chat box.
We will now continue with Goran's presentation, and we will be on the lookout for the question from the Ministry of Transport at the chat box. Thank you, Goran. Please go ahead.
Yes, thank you. So next part, after this technical interoperability, we will talk about legal interoperability, which takes in consideration, so next slide, please, which takes in consideration this railway legislative framework, which is consisted of different international arrangements and national legislation, in particular with regard to contractual obligations, so harmonized documentation of for the railways transport across the entire railway corridor. So you have on your corridor OSGD agreements, SMGS agreement with regard to railway goods of international railway goods of transport, and the rules of use of freight wagons, which is PGV agreement. We also have some bilateral arrangements which are based on OSGD rules and which are defining these additional technical specific issues on each of the border crossings. So having this unified legal railway framework is actually essential for smooth border crossing movements, and that we can reduce these bottlenecks at the border crossing and provide some kind of common legal base for technical, for operational requirements, how this operation will be organized. One of the important parts that we'll like to highlight is having a common railway consignment node. So we are using SMGS consignment node, but for the entire movement between Asia and Europe, CMS consignment node is also very much convenient. So next slide, please. And this common railway consignment node along the entire railway corridor, such as CMS NGS consignment node, could actually run well between the OSGD area and the COTIF area in Europe. So that streamlines the movement because when the border crossing, when there is a change of jurisdiction from OSGD to COTIF or vice versa, So there is no need for reconsignment, for production of new railway consignment node. So that takes time. That actually kind of makes some kind of disruption of the processes of movement across the corridor. So that's why it should be encouraged to use this SIM SNGS consignment node, which are actually some of liability conditions between the two transport regimes. Another benefits is that these SIM SNGS consignment nodes could be used in the customs procedures to facilitate the procedures. We will talk much more in detail a little bit later on. It's recognized as a bank document. So we are expecting that due to the benefits which is producing, the CM-SNGS consignment node will be expanded, will have more and more usage. One of the important characteristic, not only on the CM-SNGS, but also on SNGS consignment node, is fully electronic railway consignment node. So, for example, for SIM-SNGS consignment node, there was a joint working group between CIT and OSGD. So they developed very detailed functional, legal, technical specification. The latest version is from July 2019, which are enabling actual implementation of this fully electronic paperless, which is still challenging. And we have some paperless pilots, different challenges that we would like to be addressed, can pop up during these pilots. And actually, this is the good thing that you can actually find what are the issues and how you can address them, and how in future, I believe we will have more and more paperless documents. But we will talk much more in detail for that in the next chapter. Next part, please. Next slide. So next is this last part of operational interoperability. So we'll give just a little bit flavor of it, because in the next part of the today presentation, we will address specific issues of this operational interoperability. So idea of operational interoperability is to harmonize operational practices over entire international corridor, which is, as I mentioned, most visible at the border crossing. So that's why here today we are talking more on these border crossing smart railway solutions. What kind of common operational parameters can we have? This is the operational interoperability on railways, which means harmonized international train tables, train composition, traffic management in some regions. Most importantly, maybe procedures on the handover of trains that have to be seamlessly organized, the way how the changing of locomotives and the train crew are organized, these technical inspections and maintenance of wagons, which is necessary during some of the operations. For the part of operational interoperability of other entities, such as customs and other government authorities, we have harmonization of the documents, harmonization of the procedures, recognition of the control measures, recognition of the customs seals, for example, and many other issues that could be tackled in order to have this higher level of harmonization, which means less spending time at the borders and seamless movement across the corridor. Next slide, please. So here on the slide, you have some situation of most common situation, how actually on almost everywhere the operationals are organized. So we have two stops actually. One stop is done at the border crossing of the exiting country. Other stop is done at the entry country. At one of these countries, you have this handover procedures, change of locomotives, change of crew. And the target of this operational interoperability is how to improve efficiency, which means monitoring and improving the time spent, the service, the quality that is provided there, which will eventually be reflected in the tariffs and the prices of the transport. So it's important to understand that we cannot talk only about operational interoperability if we don't take in mind the level of technical and the level of legal interoperability, because they are interlinked. And when we are talking about interoperability, we don't talk only about the railways. We have to be fully aware of the relations with other customers and the stakeholders which are included. So it's very complex, actually, procedures at the borders. Different players, different stakeholders may have different priorities, different strategies. So that's why it's important to have some kind of a long-term jointly agreed agenda on the strategic level to implement this kind of several individual projects, but with some kind of continuity and organization between different projects. And to have this type of multiple short and medium-term operations. So some of the aspects actually we will address at the end of this seminar with the corridor management mechanisms. So one of the issues that we would like to go further on is step by step how we can have these smart railway solutions actually implemented in the organization of the processes. So we can go to the next slide, and here we can talk about electronic information exchange for facilitation of border crossings. So this is one of the most important parts that we would like to address here, and it has actually two elements: electronic information exchange between the railways and electronic information exchange between the railways and the control authorities. The main need for this enhancing of electronic information exchange as a key element of any smart solution is to actually reduce the manual processes, to reduce the paper-based information exchange, because now the railways processes are prone to exchange a lot of the paper documents. Still, a lot of information between different players is exchanged by phones, by faxes, by emails, and these processes cannot be automated if they are done in that way. So that means delays, that means inefficiencies. So that's why digitalization and electronic information exchange is actually key for the further improvement in the development of railway transport processes, in particular on the border crossings. Next slide, please. So it is very important to have different information exchange from railways to railways. For example, information on consignment note, information on estimated time of arrival, list of the wagons that will be handed over. But before starting there, we have to be aware of what are the actual automated information system within the railways. So their own international information systems. So what is the communication that they provide to the clients? Is it possible to have this paperless and technology implemented on the national level, for example? How the contacts are done with national informational systems with other partners, other business plans. So in railways, we have so many different types of information systems. Some of them are focusing on operational planning, processing of documentation, automation of the traffic control, and all these different information systems in some way they have to be integrated, and this is one of the challenges, how to actually share information between them within the system. As I mentioned earlier, the digitalization should be done as much as possible, and automation that will follow. So if you have already digital information, you can automate processes, you can optimize the processes. Next slide, please. At the moment, if we analyze situation in Euro-Asian region, for example, we have three different systems for electronic information exchange. In European Union and in Europe, we have this telematics application for freight. They call it TAF-TSI, which is technical specification for interoperability, which are adjusted for the OTIF region with telematics application for freight uniform technical prescription, UTP, for OTIF. In the OECD area, electronic information exchange is done based on OECD agreements, but actually with AD bilateral arrangements. And there is some kind of level of CIS, electronic information exchange level, which is managed by the IT center on CIS CRT to develop this monthly consolidated freight loading plan, MES plan. So all these three different systems are actually independently developed, and naturally they don't have immediate interfaces. So it's very difficult to connect them. However, all of them are aimed for facilitation of international freight transfer. There are a lot of common elements, common data elements, which are theoretically exchangeable. So presently there is some work how to connect Europe and European Union and rest of the OECD region, how to make efficient information exchanges in both systems. But the additional problem that we have that some countries in the region here, they don't don't participate in these trade regimes, these transport regimes at all. So we have in Southeast Asia, in ASEAN countries, they are not participating in OTIF or OECD. So from a regional point of view, as Sandeep earlier mentioned, it's important to have some kind of umbrella on electronic information exchange. So to be able to use this electronic information exchange within the system, within, for example, OECD, but across the systems as well, with OTIF and theoretically with other countries. So this next step will be suggesting under intergovernmental agreement, some kind of new annex with the basic elements that could maybe support this umbrella concept to, after that, provide easier way how to organize electronic information exchange even across different the systems. So what kind of common essential information will be exchanged can be agreed here. So that can be theoretically different, but all of them should be aimed to facilitate the transport. Next slide, please. Here you can have some kind of overview of different type of messages. They are related to the planning process, to the operation, and even for the after analysis, which is done after the completion of the transport process. So a lot of the information exchange is actually related to consignment node, to organization of the train composition, a different type of information about the forecasting of trade movements and reporting the trade movements, estimated time of arrivals and different wagon events. One of the challenges is how to harmonize these different messages in different transport regimes. And we have a working group between OECD and ERA, which is working on mapping. And as you can see here, a lot of these messages are already done. We still have ongoing work on ETA, and we still have work on Rolling Stone reference database, which is going on. But this is very promising side that it will be possible in near future to electronically exchange seamlessly the information between the two systems. Next slide, please. if you have your own system, if you have after that agreed what you will exchange, you will need some kind of supporting tools, and these are already available. So these are some kind of interfaces for electronic information exchange between different partners, railway undertakings, railway infrastructure managers. So these are some commercial IT solutions which are already implemented in Europe. In the OECD, this type of IT systems also exist. For example, this InfoSet IT tool is possible to link different IT systems in the OECD area. One of the challenges is that we have different standards of these messages. So we have these XML standards, which are more web-based, and we have this UN EDIFACT standard, but it's possible also to link different types of messages as well. Next slide, please. So what will be the usual part of establishing this electronic information exchange? First, in the OECD area, which you are most interested, it will be establishing of bilateral EDI agreements. I believe you already have with the Russian Federation. I'm not sure what is the situation with China. So you need to have adequate information system and infrastructure for electronic information exchange within the country. And in order to have this paperless electronic information exchange, you need some mutual recognition of electronic signature, which is one of the challenges because countries have different rules, different laws within the country. Once you establish the way of validation of the electronic signatures, so it's possible to start with this paperless electronic document processing, and usually the country will start with the empty wagons. And from some information that I've seen recently, in the last couple of years, I think Mongolia started exchanging something with the Russian Federation. And next will be fully paperless exchange of documents for the actual transport of goods. So we have such practices. I hope that you can realize soon as well in Mongolia. Next slide, please. Let's see some practical example here. You have these OECD leaflets, OECD documents, which are describing a lot of details how this is done. Here you have example of Russia and Kazakhstan. There are some differences with other countries which are presented in this leaflet. I'm not sure what is actual situation in Mongolia, but the concept is that the IT system of one country enables production of electronic consignment notes. That consignment note will be translated from the EDI system in a corresponding message. Here this UN EDIFACT IFTMIN message, which will be also joined with this electronic data exchange marker. So you can exchange as electronic communication through this interface to the other country. So once so this is the first step of information. This is only information exchange about information of the consignment note. Once the goods are processed at the border, and once the consignment note is released, another message with the release status could be also exchanged, which is subject to this automatic signing. And here we have this confirmation of validation and reporting this electronic signature back from one country to another. There are some differences from country to country, but conceptually, this is the way how how the system exchanges information and how the validation could be done. When we are talking about electronic information exchange and electronic signature, there are some differences here between electronic signature and digital signature. Usually here is requested to have a digital signature with a certificate that confirms this type of validity. And here we are using these trusted third-party services. But it's important that actually the countries within the country, the clients and the trusted third-party services are exchanging messages only in jurisdiction between them. And additionally, TTP to TTP can exchange the messages directly or kind of embedded within the message as is presented here in this slide. So I don't think that I should go more in detail of explaining this one, but you have these linkages, and if you are interested, you can go more in depth from this OECD leaflet. Next slide, please. From the part of electronic information exchange between railways and the control authorities, here we have different options. Again, you need information in order to complete customs procedures, in order to complete other formalities. And these informations could be communicated electronically, and particularly in the way of pre-arrival information with regard to the cargo declaration and to the customs transit declaration. So different systems are being used in the countries, but we would like to have some kind of common understanding of what is possible. Next slide, please. So let's talk about a little bit about challenges, because when you have railway information and you have information which is required for different processes by customs and other agencies, not always all information are harmonized. So this is one of the challenges, the goods classification which is using and the requirements which are imposed. Different level of automations. So different stakeholders maybe have different system, which is from technical point sometimes difficult to be linked. This authentication and use of electronic signatures, it's one of the issues that have to be addressed. So it's a relatively complex process, but we have a lot of standards for the customs authority. A lot of standards are given in the WCO documents, and they can actually support some kind of harmonization and facilitate all this process for electronic information exchange. So according to the schedule, now we have break. Yes. So I have one case study, so we can do this case study after the break, or what do you suggest?
Okay, that will be good that we'll continue with the case study after the break. But I would want to seek the help of Miss Bulgan, our translator. There were some messages posted, a three-part message in Mongolian from our participant from the Ministry of Road and Transport Development. If I may ask Miss Bulgan to refer to the message box and just please translate at least for the reference of
Okay, sure. I'll try to to look at the chat box. Those are in the chat box, Fidelis? Okay, okay, sure. Okay, yeah. I'll try to do that. Thank you.
so we will if possible we Mr. Bulgan would read through the message and would be able to share that with us after our break. Right now it's 11:12. May we
Okay.
request perhaps you could have a 10-minute break, and I hope to see everyone when we resume at 11:22. 10-minute break. Okay. Thank you, Gordon.
Thank you.
Please drink your water. You've been talking for the past 1.5 hours.
Thank
And
you.
I'm still looking forward to the questions or insights from our participants.
Okay.
Chat
Thank
box or
you.
request to speak. Okay, see you. Hello, participants. I hope you're all settled in after our 10-minute break. So um, we're about to continue with the presentation, the session with Goran. Also, um, we'll just wait for Goran. Are you already settled
Yes, I'm
in?
here.
Okay, all right.
Yes.
So in that case, Miss Bulgan, if I may, I hope you have gone through the short intervention from our participant from Mongolia, Mongolia's Ministry of Road and Transport. May we seek your help to translate, please? Okay, so the translation is actually posted on our chat box, Gordon. So this was shared by by
Okay.
yeah,
Let me
I
look in.
believe director our participant who commented is from the which particular from the Policy and Planning Department of the Ministry of Road and Transport Development. So as mentioned, Zamin Ud Logistics Center is not operating currently in full capacity as a park. There's no logistics in its full sense. There is need to build another road with wide gauge, as well as there's lack of containers loading and uploading field. The next step
Okay.
will be to provide better connectivity to auto transport and enhance operations. So yeah,
Yes, thank you for all these comments. Actually, this fits well with what we have identified as a necessity for increasing the capacity for efficient dealing with the break of gauge operations. And I hope that these facilities will be finalized soon. So I know that the Mongolia was also involved in some kind of data collection with Karek. I'm not sure if this particular border crossing is included, but idea is that once you have put in the place all these new facilities, you should be able to actually streamline actual movement, and that should be reflected in the reduction of the time and eventually the reduced cost for the customers. Thank you for the comments. So we can continue. Can you hear me?
Yes,
can
we
hear
can hear
you.
you.
Okay.
So
Okay.
yes.
So let's continue with our presentation. Now we're in the part of the electronic information exchange, and for this part we have a specific the case study. Theoretically two, but actually they are connected in one. The case study. So next slide, please. And this is the experience of the electronic interaction between the railways and customs in the Russian Federation. They started quite early in 2004, actually, to do some kind of electronic information exchange. Here on this slide, you have some relatively recent developments, which are more focused on the paperless document electronic information exchange, which started with this preliminary information in 2014. After that, it was upgraded to this arrival legislation and temporary storage information, which was exchanged between the railways and the customs. After that, it was more focus was given on the customs transit part, which started in the beginning with electronic declaration, which was followed by paper. And in the beginning, actually, the ending of the custom transit was not done by the system, but recently, relatively recent, in 2018, the ending of the custom transit also was conducted in the paperless form. And the latest efforts are actually to expand these pilots, which will introduce first in Eurasian Economic Union, this custom transit procedure on the Eurasian level. And hopefully we will have something even more in future. But at the moment, step by step, these are the steps which have been done in the electronic information exchange between the railways and the customs in Russian Federation. So next slide, please. So we can see how the system was actually created, because the Russian railways, as other railways in the around the world, they have different type of the system. For example, they have this ETRAN system, which prepares transport documents, including this railway consignment note, which was actually presented in one of the slides earlier. And the clients can interact electronically with the railways. They have other systems as well, this ASUP system, this ASU system on the border crossing, ASU PS, some commercial system which are related to the temporary storage or warehouses, and different systems also are available for the forwarding agents. So idea is how to use this multiple system, as you can see here in this line, so 5 system or even more, to connect them in order to interact with the customs. So they created this central system for electronic interaction with customs, AISEV. The acronym is from Russian, actually. But this system actually extract some of this data from other railway systems and facilitate electronic information exchange with the single system of the Russian Federation. So this system actually creates some kind of automated working place of this AIS EV system. Clients, from the other hand, as I mentioned, that they can connect to the ETRAN, but they also connect directly to the Russian customs system, and they use this preliminary information portal, which is also linked with this central system for electronic interaction of between railways and the customs. Other foreign railways are also connected. You can see here on the bottom of the left side, here these are AD systems, which we presented in one of the slides earlier, are actually connected with the several foreign railway systems, including Mongolia and other partners. Also, some connections are given with the Ministry of relevant ministries. So idea is to have some electronic interaction which is able to reuse already available information from different systems and reuse them for the purposes which are needed between railways in the customs in order to facilitate the process. As we already mentioned in the earlier slide, we have preliminary information, we have customs as a top priorities in interaction between the customs and the railways. So this is kind of system which is slowly developing. So it's building one by one. So it's not, it's started from immediately. So different options have been added and depending on these priorities. And if we go to the next slide, here we have one of the relatively recent project Intertran, which was initiated by Russian Railways a couple of years ago, and the last 2-3 years is actually being implemented. So this is the project which is not strictly railways, but it's actually connecting some kind of multimodal aspects, because it connects railway station, it also connects ports. And this is the process which involved a wide range of stakeholders within Russian Federation and other countries, because we have the start, for example, of the movement of this Intertran project from Japan, from South Korea, from China, from different countries. And after that, the goods are moving across Russian Federation to the European countries, to Belarus, and to other EU countries. So the project idea was, project goal was actually to increase the paperless technology. So they already have some kind of level of paperless documents that they've been using before they started the project, but they expanded the number of documents that they are using as fully paperless. So no paper is exchanged, but everything is done on paperless form with some kind of mobile workstation for paperless processes, some kind of tablets that they're using during the system. So that helps to optimize the processes, not only on the railway station, but also in the ports. And we have here the Vladivostok station on the port, which is also this communication between port and the station have been improved. So you can see here in the slide, so there is a electronic information exchange between the port and the customs and between the railways and the customs. The systems are connected, so the goods can start moving after that. So we have optimization of the processes at the port, and we have optimization of the processes of the customs, which means electronic transit declaration and electronic closing of the custom transit procedure. So if you can see here, the goods have been started, for example, from Vladivostok, go to Moscow region and station Siligatnaya. So here we have a lot of different type of information exchange as well with regard to this temporary storage or to arrival notice, which actually enables electronic confirmation that customs procedure has been ended without any movement of paper documents. So this was the first part of activities under the Intertran project. If we go to the next slide. So the first phase was organized in 2018-2019, and that was only in the import direction. After that, starting from 2019 and this year, the movements of the transit across the Russian Federation have been tested. So this is kind of gradual expansion also on the different routes, different stations that are being using this technology. So starting from one route, 2 stations, they are trying to expand in more and more stations. So what are the effects? So you can see here that the beneficial effects are can be noted in the seaport and the Vladivostok commercial port, and when the processing of the goods have been reduced from 5 days to 2 days due to these paperless technologies and better organization between different stakeholders. Also, it's a receiving terminal, a receival station in the Moscow, from 2 days only to 1 day. So we don't have the moment on the transit this specific data, how much reduction of the time have been done in the transit, because we need a little bit more data to be assured. But it's very encouraging that we expecting the similar trends on the reduction on the processes, the terminals, as well reduction in the processes on at the borders. This could be also analyzed, if we go to the next slide, step by step to different parts, because it's important to analyze where these savings have happened. So you can see here some example of reduction of the time at the ports, and the reduction of the times at the railway station, for which which can happen due to speeder, so facilitated movement of the consignment nodes, for example, preparation for different type of actions at the platforms, compiling different type of operations for the notification that are given in each step of the operation for preparation of train to start and to move at different stages in the ports and other stations. So significant reduction of the time have been given, and you can see some small promotional videos. I'm not sure. You can see by yourself later on if you're interested from the slide or from the materials that we have presented. If we go to the next slide, when we like to actually to highlight the potential benefits of not only of this case study, but in general of electronic information exchange. So if we have information exchange between different stakeholders, all communication and coordination could be improved. And reduction of paper-based processing with higher level of digitalization can enable automation of the processes. It's important to reduce rekeying of same data again and again in the system. Even if you have systems, it's better to reuse the same data to connect the systems with electronic messages, so to reduce multiple data entries. That will improve accuracy, so you can avoid some mistakes that can happen, that can actually increase the reliability. So not only between the commercial partners, but also between the railways and the authorities. So in that case, they can improve their risk management, and the processes of the railway control could be much more optimized. If the customs authority have more data, and if we have this close relationship with the railways, they can authorize this so-called simplification for customs procedures. The WCO, World Customs Organization, recommends some simplification for customs procedures for authorized economic operators, and the railways could easily get this type of simplification. One part of it is to provide information. So the railways are in position to provide this information because they already have them in their systems. So that could lead to reduced time for customs control and streamlined movement across the borders. Eventually, the transport operation could be accelerated, and the cost of the transport could be reduced. Next slide, please. Here are some information of the recent study, which is conducted by UIC in cooperation with ISC, and they analyzed what will be the impact, for example, of this electronic interoperability. And they make some kind of estimation using this the modeling techniques, that it could be expected by 2030 across the Trans-Siberian corridor that five-time growth could happen, and important part of it could be done because of electronic interoperability, which is could be related if it's possible to reduce the price by 20% and to accelerate all these movements because of the 100% use, for example, of CMS and GS consignment note. So I'm not aware if you had some similar data modeling for the region, but this is one of really useful exercise to have some kind of planning on the impact that electronic interoperability can have. So it should be encouraged. It could be considered actually as one of the smart solutions. So here we can just see if we have on the next slide, please. If we have some comments from the floor, maybe on the experiences that you have of electronic information exchange. As I mentioned, I was in Mongolia 2016. In that time, I don't think that you had operational, at least I was not aware of it, but from some recent presentation, I've seen that you are starting using these electronic signature technologies for electronic information exchange with Russian railways. So it will be very interesting to hear what are your experiences, what are the challenges that you are facing. So if you have some comments, please feel free to share with us. We can go on similar way as earlier, so feel free to share that comments on the messages. Fee, what you suggest?
Yes. So perhaps we could continue with the presentation, and then we'll just have some messages posted as from our participants up towards maybe, and also seek their views. When we finished, we'll allocate the last perhaps 10-15 minutes of our session for them to raise their questions as well. So please go ahead, Goran.
Okay, thank you. So with that, we'd actually finalized this chapter, which was a very important chapter on electronic information exchange, and we can go further on the new technologies for efficient and secure border crossing by rail. So border crossings are actually the critical part of the international transport corridors. And if we have inefficient controls of the railways and of the control agencies, that could be immediately shown as some kind of delays, lack of reliability. So that could be repeating, that could be lasting, or maybe occasional issues that could happen from time to time. Whatever it is, so if we have this type of uncertainty, what type of controls, how the controls will end up, that could actually have some kind of negative impact. So one of the potential how to address this issue is to apply some new technologies that will not only secure the controls, but also that will provide higher level of efficiency. So we are talking about automation, non-intrusive inspections, and we can also talk about electronic tracking with electronic seals as examples of such technologies. And I believe that some of them are already used in Mongolia, and some of them maybe we are considering to employ, so that will be interesting to see how other countries are doing and what other countries are implementing in this regard. Next slide, please. So we have bundled here, please don't be confused, the railway inspections and the regulatory controls, which are completely different issues. But we are talking about some technologies which could be beneficial for both, for railway inspections and for regulatory controls such as customs. So that's why we are talking in general terms without always making a kind of difference between the railway inspections and the regulatory controls. So they target two aspects, as I mentioned: efficiency, how to more efficient organize the type of controls, and security aspect, how to be sure that controls that we are doing are actually doing the purpose, that are assuring the necessary technical checks for the railway purposes and the necessary security control check for the needed for border agencies such as customs and other border agencies. Conceptually, will be more effective if we have potential to collect as much as possible data while the train is still in motion. So these are dynamic type of control. So we are talking about the systems which are enabling dynamic control and collecting the data while the train is still in motion. Depending on the type of technologies, type of the system, it may be needed for the train to reduce the speed because there's some kind of limit. So if the train is going through the area where these type of inspections of dynamic controls are done, should be the information should be provided. What is the maximum allowed the speed? So all these data could be collected on the efficient way. Once we have as much as possible data collected, by using the electronic information systems, is it possible to collect all this data, to transfer data in the form which is needed for their analysis, from the analysis to detect different types of irregularities and to suggest some further action. So we are talking about automation. So support for inspection system that can automate this system doing some kind of background. So as a controlling officer or as a railway official which is in charge for this type of technical controls, to have more options presented, what type of action are actually recommended for this specific movement. Sometimes it's needed to physically control the goods. But that is actually possible without physical interference. So that's why we are talking about non-intrusive inspections, which means no need to unseal the goods, no need to reseal the goods, because all these unsealing, resealing, recording what is sealed has been used, that takes time. So to use as much as possible these non-intrusive inspections in order to conduct these controls. Next slide, please. Here are some examples of the system. Some of them you're probably very familiar with. The systems actually could be used as an individual systems, or maybe they can be bundled as a kind of more comprehensive systems. So for most common individual systems are like electronic dynamic weighing scales that are widely using. I believe that you are also using them on the corridor in Mongolia. Also, there is some kind of video surveillance for different purposes. We will go more in the detail. So that could be just for the following the security of the movement, or maybe to analyzing the data which are provided from that the video. That could be, for example, the number of the container, or maybe some irregularities. And some scanning systems also could be introduced in this part of inspections. For example, this type of laser scanning or X-ray scanning. So different types of options. The questions that are sometimes raised about this inspection is where to position. What is the best way to position those systems? Usually they are positioned on the entrance of the stations, or they can be positioned directly at the border crossing, because the station could be actually positioned in some kind of distance. Even if you have these systems, the things that we have to consider is how you are using the system and with whom do you share this data, and is it possible to optimize the usage of this data in order to analyze information. So, for example, if the railways is connected, information about weight with dynamic scales. So this is very relevant information for the customs, for example, in order to run some kind of risk management systems. But you need to have capacities within the customs, within the railways, not only to share, but to use this data on the way which could be more efficient. That primarily means risk analysis, common risk analysis between different agencies, and actions which are relevant for that. Next slide, please. We also have some automated systems, which is common as a multifunctional intelligent gate system. So they can have attached different type of technologies, detecting, imaging, video processing. They can have this optical character reading in order to read the wagon and container number and to facilitate the movement after that within the station, because you always need to read the number and to write this time number. So this optical reader actually could be positioned on several places, not only on the first one. There are some challenges because in the beginning this technology actually has a very low level of the accuracy, but now it's improving. But it will never be 100%. Still, it will be some kind of challenges in the implementation, but it helps. With laser scanning, it's possible to have information about oversized cargo, so you have immediate information about that. And it's possible to have additional sensors, which are becoming more and more available. So you can have immediate information if there is some kind of leakage, if there is increased heat, which suggests some kind of problems with the rolling stock or with some other issues. So these multifunctional systems are already installed in several border crossings, and they present good opportunities to reorganize and facilitate the border crossing movement as well. So they are not only for border crossing, you can have them inside the terminals as well. In particular, for example, on the multimodal terminals, when you can collect information also from the trucks which are coming, and to optimize this multimodal interaction. Next slide, please. In the part of automation and non-intrusive inspection, we have X-ray, gamma ray scanning, which is kind of standard equipment for the customs, radiation detectors, electronic video surveillance of the movements, for example, between the actual entry in the country and the area when the first stop of the train will happen. Every stop of the train actually can be monitored for increased security if necessary. So all this technology helps minimizing interruption of railway freight traffic and increased risk management and increased security. Next slide, please. Another possibility for use of new technologies is electronic tracking of the movement. So we have here use of several different types of technologies, from satellite positioning system to cellular communication to electronic seals, which are providing physical closing of the doors, and also information about integrity of the seals, if the seal is open or not. So you can use this advanced-based software and computer networks to track in the real time the movement and to track integrity of the shipment. Use of electronic seal is already put in place in some countries, but we have to make some kind of distinction. You can have mandatory electronic seals, but that should be potentially limited only for situation where otherwise it will be not possible to move the goods at all. You can have conditional use of electronic seals, for example, granting higher level of simplification for the railways or other operators. That could be also voluntary, because there are some commercial systems that are using. So the railways can decide to use a voluntary basis, just share this data with the customs, and actually to reduce the level of the risk detected, which will be reflected actually to higher level of stops at the border. You can have single country, multi-country. Actually, ESCAP was doing a lot of work in that on the road transport, but that could be easily translated to the railway transport. And you have graphical presentation in this slide as well. Different types of e-seals could be used. They could be active, they could be passive, and that could be integrated with different sensors if for commercial reasons, for example, if there is interest to track the shocks, the temperature, the other characteristics of the cargo. Next slide, please. Just to show you now some practical examples where these type of systems are being put in use. For example, for moving of the goods, third country goods across India for Nepal, the system of ECTS was introduced both for road and for rail, and they've done that based on some kind of memorandum of understanding. So it's necessary, if you like to use this system, to be registered on one company which is authorized by the government to use to provide this managed services. So they are providing these electronic seals for GPS tracking, and you can see here on the photos they're using handheld devices to activate it, to read these electronic seals. One of the particular specifics of this system is that this supports, because you have to submit some kind of information for the electronic seal. But this system is a kind of extended a little bit in order to use as electronic custom declaration in the same time. So that actually supports automatic reconciliation and discharge of transit. So they are combining this electronic tracking system with electronic transit system. And the main effect is that the container turnaround time has been decreased, and the importers are not charged high demurrage and detention charges. Next slide, please. Similar system is used in Russian Federation. These are ANS, electronic navigation seals, that you can see here on this slide, and they are used for some goods which otherwise will be sanctioned goods to move by road and the rail as well. There is a sailing operator here dedicated, Digital Service Development Center. If you visited this website, you can see a lot of information how actual system is actually organized. The testing of the system has been done in Russian Federation and some joint Eurasian pilot. So next slide, please. Again, we have a lot of benefits from electronic tracking because increases in safety and security and any type of unlawful intrusion, potential smuggling. So that could actually increase the confidence in that custom transit procedure will be conducted properly. If we have higher confidence, we can grant more simplifications, and that could be actually increase the efficiency of the customs clearance. So I'm just highlighting this because electronic tracking shouldn't be understood that we put on top of it that we already have. No, the way is that you are using electronic tracking in order to reduce some kind of paper-based procedures and to simplify formalities. So this is the added benefit of electronic tracking. And ultimately, that will provide faster turnaround time and a lower insurance cost because you will have some kind of costs for electronic tracking. Usually there's some kind of charging for using the equipment, but overall costs should be lower. So they're kind of, in all these electronic changes that are happening, there will some kind of losers and some benefits, but the overall benefits are actually higher for the overall transport movement. So we will have better quality of the services with overall faster movement and potentially lower costs. So this is more or less for these new technologies that I would like to briefly share with you in this part. So I would also like, if we go to the next slide, to invite you to share with us if you have some of these new technologies already employed on Mongolia. Are you considering to do that? What are you consider to be the major challenges? What are the possibilities or potential benefits? So if you have some kind of comments now, or please share with us in the box. Because all this discussion we are doing relatively briefly now. We are giving you some kind of more or less overview of the potential, but in future, theoretically, we can have more in-depth discussion for specific issues if you have some interest about that. Can we see if we have some comments? If not, I would like to invite actually Sandeep to briefly, I understood that he will have some kind of brief intervention.
Mm-hmm. We don't have any comments for now, so perhaps Sandeep?
Yes, thank you, Fee. And can I request, so there were two presentations which I shared, and the second was on digitalization. Can that be brought up and some slides moved on? So as they do, let me. So I would like to just say a few things on what Goran has been presenting in context of Mongolia Railway. Yeah, please move few slides at least. Yeah, please keep on moving. Yeah, please go ahead. So for Mongolian Railways, it is very important to focus on a couple of things. Number one is that you should have close cooperation with customs and the way you exchange information, particularly at Zaminud and Sukhbatar border crossings. In my understanding, please move ahead. In my understanding, the railway company Ulaanbaatar is already taking steps with Russian railways on this. So I'm not fully aware of your information exchange system with China railways. So that is one thing you need to figure out. And another thing is at Zaminud Erenhot border crossings, how customs and railways, they have a system of exchanging information. I understand Mongolia Custom has now gone online. They have an online tool. So if information from the consignment note can be really received in the Mongolian customs, then you don't need, Mongolia Customs may not need a formal customs transit declaration. So these are some of the things which you can probably deliberate. I can give you one example. Iran has recently, Indian Railway formulated a group to go into all the aspects of electronic information exchange with their neighboring railways as well as within their agencies like customs and other border controls. So I would like that you consider similar step to understand the requirements of each other and how you can leverage electronic information, because paper-based exchange of information, despite the purpose they may have, they retard the efficiency of border crossing procedures. So you may like to keep minimum of paper. That is really, really very much important. So that please consider constitution of an ad hoc working group or task force or whatever you may like to call, where you can talk to requirements of each other and streamline as far as possible. Another thing is increased usage of containerization. I know Mongolian Railways mostly transfer minerals from destination A to destination B because your country is very mineral rich and you're using it for export. So please explore how far you can use containerized traffic, because the transit route through your country will get more attention if more container transportation happens. And that is where the electronic seals and online tracking can really be helpful. So these are a couple of suggestions. So I thought I will take a break and give you some heads up on these things. And let me now give you some more different food for thought in thinking about how you can further deepen the digital railway in your country. So next slide, please. So we have already spoken at length about this. Goran has been speaking about it, that why we do need to deepen digitalization in railways. The overarching objective of introducing digitalization is enhancing the operational efficiency, lowering the costs. It is also to increase customer experience and satisfaction. And as I mentioned earlier, it is very important that railways see themselves as a part of overall transport system, and therefore it is important for you to digitalize, keeping in view what is happening with other modes of transport. For example, road transport is taking a lot of steps in automation. There is already talk of automated vehicles, use of various other intelligent transport systems in road transport. So if rail will not keep pace with that, you will be further far behind in competitiveness. So these are the things which you should start thinking now to have a forward-looking plan for your railways. So next slide, please. So I will briefly tell you about the challenges you're likely to encounter. You can also look them as some of the areas which will need attention as you think of digitalizing the railways. The first, of course, is the communication infrastructure in the country, because rail communication has close linkages with the overall communication network. Though rail can also build a dedicated communication network for their own use, which is recommended for very important parts of their operations. But you cannot see them in isolation. So mostly countries have been using GSM-R. This is a global system for mobile communication and developed specifically for railways for communicating for their core operations. But slowly, this system will be phased out, and there will be a future railway mobile communication system, which is UIC is working on it. So what I am here trying to say is that please think of your communication requirements, because as you will digitalize, for example, if you want to have a digital footprints of your tracks, of your rolling stock, and you want to collect information about the state of your infrastructure. So this will increase the amount of data which you have to process. And for that, you need better networks, 2G, 3G. People are already talking of 5G. So please think of the requirements of your railways and see how the communication infrastructure can support or find some solutions for that. As also important thing to keep in mind, particularly when it comes to areas of cooperation among railways in ESCAP region, that we have a very diverse railways. In fact, Mongolia is one country which is neighbored by 2 countries which have most advanced railway transport in the world: Russia on the north and China on the south. So you actually can learn enormous amount from them in terms of modernizing your railway system. Simultaneously, you will also need to invest in digital infrastructure, research and innovation, because these are the things which need modern skills in the capacity of the railway and transport officials. And here I use the word cultural shift, because digital is not about only technology, is also about mindset of the people. So the way you approach entire railway processes is something which is very important, and that is why we are undertaking this capacity sort of a building, which we would deepen further depending upon the needs of our member railways. And the last thing which related with data increase is the need to protect the data and the breaches of data that happens due to cyber concerns. So cyber security will become increasingly important. And again, many countries have overarching cyber laws, and they are in part applicable to systems like railways. So these are some of the areas which you may like to keep in mind as you discuss your railway strategy and railway master plan. One important area which you must take cognizance is of digitalizing your railway operations, and which areas you want to focus and what kind of challenges you can encounter. So next slide, please. So this is the last slide I wanted to show before I will hand over back to Goran. So how can we overcome these challenges? So as I said, Russian Railways has developed a national strategy for digitalization of railways. Obviously, they are a huge railways with wide connections with their neighbors. But I think the world in which we live, we cannot be oblivious of digital technologies. So your railways should at least devote some part of their strategic outlook towards this kind of issues. Recently, ESCAP has sent a questionnaire to all the railways in the region. I hope it has reached the table of Mongolian Railways also. Please look at it. We want to know how the railways are doing, and probably we will come out with some common issues, particularly how smaller railways, landlocked developing countries railways can leapfrog to digital technologies. So as I said, enhancing national stakeholder consultation is very important, and that is why I alluded to formation of a task force or a working group to talk about issues of electronic information exchange and other aspects of digital railway. Enhancing capacity of railway and transport officials for digital transformation, I have already spoken. And widening of international cooperation is very important. You can learn much from what other and advanced railways have done in digitalizing their rail networks. Uh, and here ESCAP will continue to play a very important role in bringing countries together in sharing your experiences in digitalization. As a part of our endeavor to develop a strategy for digitalization, uh, we also believe that Rail Innovation and Digital Fund can be created, which will particularly help landlocked developing countries and least developing countries in undertaking projects which will deepen the digital aspects of railways in the region. They will not be. This fund is not supposed to act like as a bank, but as more as a catalyst to have small projects that can be further scaled with investments by other donors. So these are some of the thoughts I thought I could share with you as you are deep into this training. And there are officials from Ministry of Finance, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, apart from railways and other organizations. It is very important that though your railway may be small in its network, but I know you have a high ambition. There are plans to build more railway lines, increase the exports, increase the movement of raw material and other things. So, but all of this will be, if you can think the digital aspects as you invest in infrastructure, that will really help over the long run to reduce your costs. And that will be very important because railway investments are very capital intensive to begin with. You cannot undo the systems at a short notice. And therefore, I would really urge you to take this aspects of digitalization in building your infrastructure right up front, so that when you are there, you don't have to change much things. So I'll thank you very much, and I hope you're enjoying the session with Goran. The idea of Goran's session is to expand your knowledge about options that are available. Not all of them will be equally relevant for Mongolia. And so you can connect which one of them will be more relevant, and we can actually dig deeper into some of them based on your request. We can do some specific studies and come out with some specific recommendations which are relevant for you. I thank you very much again for your attention.
Thank you, Sandeep. And so just to highlight on that, what very much aligned to the work of also the focus of East of our sub-regional office, the idea of cross-sectoral coordination, especially between customs and transport. So we are, as resonated by Sandeep, we stand ready for any thinking or directions that Mongolia is considering towards that in terms of ensuring there is a regularity in terms of coordination between these two important policy areas. So on that, Goran, the floor is yours, please.
Thank you. So if we can continue with the presentation. So we had previously explored some of the smart solutions in general about electronic information exchange. That was the first. The second was use of new technologies for efficient and secure border crossing. So now we will go more specific. One of the solutions that we would like to explore is potential for facilitation of customs transit. Because here we have actually higher level of potential for facilitation if we are focused on customs transit, which is, I believe, important for Mongolia. Because in customs transit part, you have several countries involved. You have several different set of legislations, and you have railways, and you have customs authority, and other stakeholders involved. So two key aspects for facilitation of customs transit I would like to discuss. First is use of railway consignment note as a customs document. So this is actually key pillar on which you can build the facilitation of customs transit. Another potential we would like to explore and actually to launch here with you, to have some kind of put in consideration the option for kind of new international arrangements for organization of custom transit, which actually are based on what we already have and what we are already doing. Let me go step by step for these two parts. Next slide, please. For customs transit, what is important to know that in theory, we don't have harmonized customs procedures. You have one customs procedures for movement of goods from A to B in China, one in Mongolia, another in Russian Federation, and so on. So there is a lack of harmonization. Each of these customs authority may have diverse requirements for submission of advanced information with regard to customs transit, because we are not talking at the moment about imports and exports. What kind of customs transit documents are being used? Again, we have different type of customs transit, electronic or paperless or whatever, still they're kind of different. Some countries, I'm not sure what the situation across your corridor, have different requirements for sealing or resealing. Some are requiring additional resealing in each of the countries. In theory, if you get to analyze the custom transit, it's much more burdensome than other procedure because it's repetitive. You have border crossings on the road and repetitive actions by each of the customs. Repetitive inspections on the same goods containers and the rolling stocks. So you have increased complexity, which means increased cost and potential delays. And there is an option for facilitation of this custom transit movement with focusing more on departure, destination point, and increasing cooperation and electronic information exchange for everything that goes in between, everything that goes in the border crossing. Next slide, please. So key element, what connects everything from departure to destination is the railway consignment node. If you have single railway consignment node, such as SNGS consignment node in the OSGD area, or CSNGS consignment node, which goes from OSGD to OTIF area, it's important that you don't have reconsignment at the border, so you're using the single documents along all movements. So this is the key element that can connect the customs transit procedure, and in accordance with the Annex 9 on Harmonization Convention, it is recommended actually to use railway consignment node as a custom document. The problem is that it's not a problem, but actually this is kind of general recommendation. So how to use it? It depends from country to country. It's not really harmonized. So we have still work to do on how to actually implement what does it mean using a railway consignment node as a custom document. Our understanding is that we have to actually reuse it, whatever it's already available as an individual data, which is already located in the railway consignment node, as a custom transit document data. So this is one challenge that should be addressed. After that, we can talk about facilitation of border crossing formalities. Why? Because we don't have to put new additional information, because we already have everything what we need from departure, and we can just monitor how it's going from border to border. That means that all intermediary parties in the customs transit, their involvement could be reduced, because we have the most of the information already provided from the railway consignment node. We should be aware that at the moment we have paper-based, we have dual, which means paper-based in addition to electronic information exchange, and we will have more and more paperless format of railway consignment note, which means no customs, no railway consignment note data at all. Just checking some messages, but please let me know if there is something that.
Oh, okay. Goran,
Yes.
just a reminder, we have the next 20 minutes to wrap up
Yes.
our session, but
Yes.
may I, we receive a request to speak from Mongolia's National Development Agency. Perhaps it could be arranged by our support team so that any
Would you like me
questions-
to stop now or to give the floor?
Yes, please, so that we could
Okay.
just...
Okay, thank you.
So we're waiting for our NDA participant to speak.
Mongolian NDA, I understand that you haven't clicked allowed Kudo to access your mic and camera. Please do so. On mic and camera. The location to turn mic and camera on is located in the middle lower part of your screen. You will see they are in red. I saw Mongolia MCT also click request to speak, but we can have only 6 people on the screen. May I now invite some of speakers to release the mic if you do not have the speaking role at the moment. Thank you. Mongolia MTC, now you have the floor.
Sorry. I don't hear anything right now to interpret.
We have also our participant from Mongolia NDA.
Both Mongolia MTC and NDA have the floor. If you are ready, please click.
За микрофоны идэвхжүүлээ шүү.
May we request Mongolia's NDA and Mongolia's MTC to the floor is yours. You could already say your piece.
Sorry, I don't hear anything. But now I hear, but not the question. It's NDA.
We will continue our presentation. If I may request NTA and MTC who have requested to speak, you may also post your message on the chat box. On this note, we will have the presentation of Mr. Goran because we only have about 15 minutes to finish our session. Goran, please go ahead.
Thank you. So if we can continue now with the customs transit option that we were talking about and the using of railway consignment note as a customs document. Next slide, please. So based on these national and customs union requirements, the two aspects of the use of railway consignment note has to be regulated. One is the entry-exit information in the form of pre-arrival information. And second is custom transit procedure, which could be related. So sometimes it's possible actually not to request pre-arrival information if you have already available in addition information within the custom transit declaration. Here, the role of the carrier, the role of the railways could be highlighted as a declarant, actually as a principle. So the carriers could be the one who will provide this information directly from the railway consignment note. The challenge is to harmonize the customs requirements, and we already have some World Customs Organization tools, which are listed in the specific Annex A on the parts of the incoming goods and the custom transit in the Annex A. Some specific details are given in the WCO safe framework of standards. For example, this 2-hour limit for submitting the pre-arrival information before goods coming in the territory by rail, it's actually provided there. We also have WCO data model, which gives specific details what kind of elements should be given in the advanced cargo declaration, goods declaration. But here, this data model actually provides maximum set. So we don't need maximum data. We have to provide optimal data, which is necessary for efficient organization of the process. So this is the part that we can start working, but we already have the ground settled with these instruments provided by the WCO. Next slide, please. The idea is to have customs transit declaration, which is complete equivalent of the railway consignment note. So that could be electronic format, only electronic format, so no paper. But here, some of the challenges which have to be addressed is what are the additional data elements which are not included in the railway consignment note that we need. It is possible to have such additional data, but they should be really, really minimized. So not to request additional information. I will explain later on why. Supporting documents, which are invoices, other packing lists, other documents, they could be also provided in electronic form or just stored by the railways and given access to the customs as may be necessary. It's also possible to have paper format. In that case, no additional custom document should be needed, but only railway consignment note should be considered, the paper of railway consignment note, one of the copies, should be considered as a custom declaration. So all options are possible. So we can see, for example, one example of European Union, when we have simplified customs procedure based on paper-based SIM or based on paper-based SIM SNGS. We also can have standard paperless procedure using new customs transit system, so only electronic, but that means paper is used only as a transport document only, or theoretically use of standard paperless NCTS, but reusing electronic data from electronic SIM SNGS. In next slide, we can see example how the paper-based procedure works. So you have country of departure, country of en route, and country of destination. So only papers are processed by railway undertakings. The customs only authenticates or put a stamp in one of the the papers, which actually allows the transit procedure to move. So no any processing is not actually done by the customs, but the customs can monitor the system because can monitor this monthly statement which are provided by each of the railways. So if you can see here in this example, actually an en route in transit procedures, they're very, very simplified procedure which only verification of passage could be done. Theoretically, nothing, because everything is done by the railways, customs can only control. Now we have some kind of requirements to have some kind of additional electronic processing in this part, and we will explain that one in the next examples. Next slide, please. Here we have an example of Turkey, which is also involved in this convention of common transit together with European countries. So they are using this simplified customs procedure, which means simplification based on paper-based team. They don't use Team SMGS at the moment, but this is kind of recommendation that they will have to use. But in addition to that, they do some kind of electronic information exchange, which is really minimal. Only these 4 additional data they are exchanging: wagon number, SIM number, shipment date, customs office. So they have some kind of electronic track of the movement, but actual data is in paper, and they have potential to access those data through the Turkish railways. Why? Because they have authorized Turkish railway as an authorized economic operator for simplified customs transit procedure. So they have kind of balance that they can follow very limited electronic tracking and have full access through the railways Turkish, which is provided because of the cooperation that they have between the railways and the customs. So this is one of the examples how that could be done. Next slide, please. But the problem is that these are kind of case-by-case solutions. So we still don't have kind of harmonized options. So that's why we would like to suggest to consider potential to have some kind of international solution. So at the moment we have in country A, start of the transit, one set of rules. Country B or C, through transit, another set of solutions. Country D, another set. So we have kind of disruption here in the processes. But if we have these common pillars, common consignment note as an electronic custom declaration, if we electronically exchange railways to railways, these customs, this common consignment note, and after that, we electronically exchange minimum necessary information from railways to customs as a customs transit document, which most of the countries already have in some way or another, but not harmonized. If we have potential to authorize railways as an authorized economic operator, which is actually standard from railway, from the WCO, if it's possible to give some kind of guarantee waiver to the countries, to harmonize procedures, and to increase international cooperation, so we can have a framework for international railway customs transit procedure, something that we don't have at the moment. For example, for road, you have tier convention. For rail, we don't have. We have to start over and over and over. Maybe we can have bilateral arrangement, maybe we can have multilateral arrangements, but what we are missing is the set of harmonized rules. So if parties play against these rules, it will be much more easier to exchange all this information. Let's go to the next slide. So this is the way how this information could be done on distributed way. So each country actually exchange information between themselves, railway to customs, but the railways are exchanging the consignment note between them across the corridor. That provides option for simplification. And if we, as I said, if we put this no transit guarantee because of the waiver recognition of customs sales, we can facilitate the movement of the transit significantly. Next slide, please. So we can have discussion a little bit on, but I would like to encourage you, if you have any suggestion, comments of this option that we are suggesting, that hopefully we can put a little bit more formally in sometime next year. That will be very useful feedback from us, because we believe that there is some kind of unused potential for harmonization of custom transit procedure, which will be further facilitated. If we go to the next slide, please. So we have presented several options for using different types of smart solutions, but they don't have to be implemented individually. So you can implement them together. And additionally, you can have joint border controls within the country on the cross-border level. So that could actually additionally facilitate the movement. So we can have some 3 examples of the potential facilitation and streamlining of border crossing procedures based on these joint controls. Next slide, please. So first is joint border crossing options on the country level. Idea is to use all these options that you can improve, to go from manual to digitalize, to go from inefficient coordination to automation, to go from uncoordinated regulatory controls to some kind of use of railway consignment nodes and better reuse of these processes. So that could eventually lead to some kind of reorganization and the streamlining of the procedures. Next slide, please. So if we have the joint border controls within the country, we can actually organize that in different types of levels. So you can transfer some border control responsibility to one of the agencies, for example, to the customs. Some concept of single window, for example, inspection is provided in, enabled in some countries. That first level of examination, first level, for example, of SPS, sanitary sanitary documents are checked by the customs. If additional controls are needed, if it's not only accepting the documents which are recognized, then the specialized agencies can enter. You can have joint teams that are doing joint controls of arrival or departure, so that minimize the time which is necessary. For the clearance, it's a little bit more difficult to organize that. But what you need to have efficient electronic information exchange, because without that, you cannot coordinate controls in the efficient manner. And we were talking about the equipment. The equipment can also be used jointly. We can also have some kind of joint risk management sets. Next slide, please. There is a lot of talk about single window, but not always railways is included. So we need a single window that takes in account all information which are relevant for railway transport. For example, we have a lot of equipment that we are using, so we can reuse this information. We can reuse pre-relevant information. So that's why we are talking development of single window facility, which is more relevant for the railway transport. So that can facilitate actually joint inspections between customs, railways, immigration, and other border crossing authorities. So if you have already single window, you can actually make some kind of consideration how that the railways can reuse some of the already available information over there. And related to single window is digital logistics platform. So not only interaction between the regulatory agencies, but also business to business informations are very important. So exchange of these logistic platforms can facilitate the coordination between different the players. So we can see actual example in the next slide, please. Yeah, this is the logging in China. So they are actually encouraging this not only B2G and G2B, but B2B exchanges, providing different type of railway information on carrier registration, e-booking, different rates. So this is a part of kind of commercial orientation that these logistic platforms could be linked to single window systems, so you can have more efficient processing of all available different information. Next slide, please. So now we can actually, this is relatively theoretical because in the practice, we don't have many options when there is not necessary to stop at all at one of the border crossings. We have something in between Thailand and Malaysia, for example, but only for passenger transport. But it's also possible to streamline movement in the way that you can have single stop controls at only one side of the border, at only one of the stations. So these are the options for streamlining as well that some of the countries may consider. Next slide, please. We also provided in the documents a case study of Rezekne, Latvia, where it's actually one of the good practices that a lot of the operations are moved from actual border crossings to the next station, which have facilities to do controls which are necessary. Here is Rezekne, which is located 45 kilometers from one border crossing, 60 kilometers from other. So you have absolutely minimal processing at these actual border crossings, but there are a lot of technology implemented. X-rays are there. There's some pre-arrival information already provided. So the stops are less than half an hour at these borders, and all actual processing is done at the next station. So this is one of the theoretical options for streamlining and the movements of all necessary processes from the border, if that is actually necessary for organization, because that can differ from country to country. Next slide, please. So we will just leave the potential for discussion with exchange of the messages. Next slide, please. Just at the end, we have a few more slides. We'd like to highlight potential for corridor management mechanism. So it's obvious that every corridor is different. We said that at the beginning, and but we have some kind of common goals, common objectives, and different corridors are trying to organize in different ways how they coordinating, how they are addressing the main functions. What are the main functions? How you develop infrastructure? How do you resolve bottlenecks? How you enhancing interoperability? How do you harmonize facilitation of border crossing procedure? How do you make corridor performance monitoring? So these are separate issues, but they have to be coordinated on some level. You need some kind of coordination between different stakeholders. You need coordination between the railways. So that's why efficient corridor management mechanism should be considered. So there is no one-size-fits-all solution, but what we would like to highlight, next slide, please, that we believe that it will be much more efficient if you have clearly structured and more permanent corridor management mechanism. So to have some kind of a regular consultation and increased following what is the operational performance. It's nothing wrong to have several levels, to have several working groups, to have several mechanisms, but we need some kind of overall kind of coordination between all these levels. So I know that you have a lot of meetings on different levels. You have a lot of working groups. What here we are kind of proposing and suggesting to have some more structured way of organizing things, the higher ministerial level, or maybe middle steering committee level, which will be constituted from the government officials and the national railway companies, and specific advisory working groups on the railway matters and border crossing matters, with continuing consultation with the private sector and the transport market stakeholders. So that will be more or less, I think, next slide, please, of this presentation. I'll be, even though we don't have much time, if you have some comments, I will be happy to hear. If not, we can just exchange whatever comments you have in the next steps. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Goran. It really was a very comprehensive and informative session, and very relevant for our participants in Mongolia, given one of the priority projects under this corridor is a railway project. So, as mentioned by Goran, well, we know that it might be a challenge posting the messages for your queries. The conversation and discussion does not stop here. We will be we will be in touch with you post event and see if whether you have further questions. Also, just to reiterate that especially in the different suggestions and recommendations, these are actually options that we could consider moving forward and see how we could help in terms of facilitating more capacity building activity on specific areas that you would want to dive deeper going into the next few months into 2021. So with that, may I just final check from our participants if they have queries? If none, thank you again, Goran and Sandeep, for joining us in this session. And we hope to still be in touch with you, and we will still continue our discussions after our training workshop. On that note, we will resume. We will have a 1 hour break. We will resume at 2 p.m. UB time for our session on project management. So with that, see you and thank you again for our participants, and Sandeep and Goran. Our pleasure.
Thank you very much.
So, yes,
please,
just final words.
Yes,
I would like to take this opportunity to thank Goran for preparing a very good material. As I have mentioned earlier, this is to expand and deepen the knowledge. Not all solutions there would be directly relevant for Mongolian context. And therefore, it is very important to understand the priorities. And you being sub-regional office much closer, you can have a close discussion with them and let us know. We can definitely work on some specific area which is of concern to Mongolian railways, and will come out with a pragmatic and sensible recommendations. I want to thank all Mongolian officials who have come from range of ministries despite this challenging time and have given us a patient hearing this afternoon. I want to thank each one of them, and I'm looking forward for working closely through regional office and also at ESCAP in Bangkok for delivering meaningful solutions. Thank you very much, V. Thank you.
Thank you, Sandeep. And to our participants, see you at 2 p.m. UB time. Enjoy your lunch.